Okay, we'll get straight into it. I think maybe for the audience, just to get things rolling, let's work down the line and we can start with you, Mary. Maybe just a brief introduction to yourself, your role and responsibilities, and I guess a top line of 2 or 3 things on your radar when it comes to contract lifecycle management and procurement in general.
Yeah, absolutely. My name is Mary Mays. I'm the VP of Procurement at ServiceNow. So we are a software company. I'm on the practitioner side, which makes it a really unique opportunity to work for a company that sells a lot of the tools that we ourselves use. So I love having that unique perspective. I've been in procurement on the Center of Excellence and Transformation side for most of my career. And I think for me, top of mind with CLM is absolutely the digitization and using AI to help take CLM to that next level, because it provides such a rich data set that's really the opportunity looking forward.
Great, thank you. Mercy?
All right. Yeah, my name is Mercy Akintounde. I'm the director for Procurement Compliance, Audit and Crisis Management at AbbVie. I've been with AbbVie for about 10 years now, and my work mainly intersects between compliance and risk. So really helping companies, teams, functions make defensible decisions in very regulated environment. So as you all know, pharma is highly regulated. So all the comments I provide today will be my opinion, my experiences, not AbbVie's. Thank you.
Great, thank you both. Okay, let's get into it with some context, I guess. We're talking about the changing role of CLM. So maybe we'll start with exploring that. Perhaps you can both give me your take on that, particularly, I guess, how the shift from storing contracts to querying them, using them for greater intelligence, has really transformed the function and where you're seeing the most benefits. Mary, you're closest, so I'll start with you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what we're seeing is CLM is moving from just being a filing system where you use it as a repository to place things that are signed, and using it as a data set to really drive strategic decisions. The cost of not doing that is high, because when you think about, procurement and legal are very upfront in that process. And so if you're using CLM as a place to just store your contracts, you're leaving a lot of things on the table. There could be clauses in there that aren't managed, auto renewals, price increases. And so the cost of just leaving that data alone is high. And so I think what we're seeing is this transition to using that information. You can use it for savings opportunities. You can use it to identify right sizing what is or isn't needed. And on the risk side, absolutely, it provides a heat map for risk when you think about where your contracts and your agreements with your vendors are, like geographically, right? And where you might have risks in that space.
Great, thank you. Great points. And Mercy, what's your take on?
Yeah, so I would say the traditional CLM system is used as a storage system. So we're moving away from that now, from that storage system to more of an intelligent system that you can query. You can look at risk, you can look at different aspects of your contract. The traditional CLM system would help you answer questions such as, where is my contract? But the advanced or the mature CLM systems will answer questions such as, where are we exposed? Where are we over-constrained? Where can we renegotiate? So there's a serious shift in how we're thinking about contracts and how we're thinking about risk. And I think there was a research that was shown that just shifting to that mature CLM, I think the research was done by Bain, there's about 9 to 11% reduction in value leakage for annual contracts, right? Just from that shift to a more intelligent system. So that's what we're saying, that's where the industry is going.
Yeah, I love that. And your point about asking the contracts, and I think that's where AI comes in, where you can conversationally say what contracts are out there with X, or how exposed am I with X? And so when you layer AI on top of it and make it conversational, I think that's where it becomes really powerful.
Absolutely.
Great, and on AI, I mean, how significant an advantage or a change does AI bring you to traditional ways, as you're talking about, of working with your CLM and I guess managing those processes? Mary?
Yeah, I think it's very significant. I think from the starting point of the data extraction, right? Like that's where I'd begin, because right now, I imagine there are a lot of people out there, right? You have all of this data, but the metadata is not really accessible to you. It's like PDF files that are just living out there. And so I think using AI to extract data and metadata at a massive scale is one of the big advantages. And then once you're there and you have extracted the data, it's working with it and using it and like conversationally being able to engage with it, building dashboards, visibility for leadership. It just provides this that we've seen with like spend data, right? And now we want to see it with contract data. And because it has lived in PDFs, that's been hard.
Absolutely. I like your point around where AI is going with this. And ultimately, it's going to be garbage in, garbage out, right? So the cleaning of the data, making sure that your metadata is consistent, making sure that you can query your contract. So the shift from that digital filing system or cabinet to a system you can talk to, you can look at the risk, you can look at the clause type, you can look at jurisdiction, you can look at value all at once in a matter of seconds. That's what AI will help us do if we can clean the data.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
So,
And
Sorry,
I
Ryan.
think we should call out where the shortcomings are too, because that's, you made a great point about garbage in, garbage out. And like I was saying with PDFs and using AI to extract it, that's where I still see a little bit of a challenge, because especially on the indirect side, your contracts with your vendors are so different, right? They're not templates. As much as you try to make it your template, we know there's a huge variety of the way contracts are structured. And I think the AI, like, we still need to get better at extracting valuable information. And so, like, it's not to say that AI is the magic that's going to solve all these problems, because there still is that very real gap. And that still is a shortcoming. And so I think the data cleanliness is an ongoing journey, even when assisted by AI, but it's certainly like a leap forward.
so how do we tackle that challenge? Is it a data management piece? Is it working that data properly to make sure you're putting the right data in, the right information in? I mean, what are the steps to effectively, I guess, leveraging AI and
Yeah.
managing that data properly?
Yeah.
Mercy, I'll come to you.
Yeah, I would say the first step is knowing where all your contracts are to start with. That centralization piece is key, and looking at the data, just planning it out. So it's more of a data orchestration and making sure that your data has a consistent flow, especially for global companies where you have so many restrictions locally. There are cases where, if I give Japan as an example, where you still require wet ink signature. You know, you have some countries where fax requirements is still a big deal from a local standpoint. So pulling it all together and making sure you have a consistent flow while cleaning your data and making sure that locally it's still relevant to the rules and regulations in the space.
Okay, you talk about consistency. I guess if you have different regions moving at different speeds towards digitization, technology adoption, how can a CLM maintain that kind of seamless global workflow without needing to revert back to manual workloads or some of those traditional processes that you talked about at the start, Mary?
Yeah, I think it's important when you're working with different regions to meet them where they're at, right? And a good CLM product can help you do that, because it can be structured with a backbone, but that is regionally specific. So it might be different templates, it might be different clause libraries, it might be different, more simplified workflows. But I think you can get even, let's say, the less mature or least mature regions onto the CLM backbone, but meet them where they are. And it's very modular. You have to be with the right CLM to do that. And so I think having that modular architecture is important.
Okay, thank you, Mercy.
Yeah, absolutely agree with that. I think it's having that core plus flex model is what it's called. So you have a globally consistent logic, but is locally configurable for compliance. So you cannot build an integrated CLM system that completely disrespects compliance in local regions. So having that global flow that is consistent, but making sure that you can configure it locally as needed. Now, we've seen organizations move into multiple regional point solutions. That's not the way out either. There's a research too, that independent case studies that show that there's about 40 to 50% failure rates when you're trying to address local requirements by creating regional solutions all over the place. That is not going to work. So it's finding a way to integrate your CLM systems so that it grows into a mature model while being able to make room for the local restrictions.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that's like as procurement professionals, what you need to challenge your CLM provider to do for you, right? Ask them those questions. How are they going to support you with that need? Because different point solutions is definitely not the way.
Great. Okay, thank you. And in terms of global risk heat mapping, we've talked about risk. How can having that integrated CLM allow you to see very quickly in real time, I guess, total financial exposure should you have geopolitical events and things like that? And how does that benefit the business and the procurement function? Mercy.
Yeah, absolutely. So the heat map is very important, and you can't do that in a siloed approach. So think about what's going on. Let's use the event with the Silicon Valley collapse, bank collapse in March of 2023. That was some years ago. Or let's even bring it to current affairs. So Middle East crisis going on right now with all the issues we have around freight costs, increases, inflation, and just cost pricing and all of that. To be able to have a system that you can query and get the insight almost in a matter of seconds is key. The speed of insight is everything. If we move to the traditional CLM system, it takes weeks. And by the time you arrive at the decision, it's probably too late. So the idea of having that integrated CLM system where you have every contract tagged by clause type, by jurisdiction, by entity, counterparty, value, everything labeled correctly, you are able to, in a matter of seconds, see where the risk is going. And geopolitical events will continue to increase. There's no shortage of that. So we have to be prepared to be able to query our contract systems to get the information. There's this code about if you cannot query it, you cannot govern it, right? So it helps you get to that risk heat map perspective if you're able to get information in a matter of seconds.
Yeah, I love that. The shift like to governance, I think the way you said like you have to govern it is so true. And again, like that's where if you can get the metadata in your system, that's the first step.
Yes.
Then you should be able to make dashboards or search it. And if you can do that, you can put AI on it as well. And so like wherever you are in the journey, starting with that metadata, like, and taking steps from there, because even with Claude, right? We have Claude. If you have Claude available to you, even if you don't have the AI functionality through your CLM today, you have the data and you can ask Claude like, okay, here's an Excel extract, like tell me what my risks are because of the conflict in the Middle East, and it can generate that for you. And like we did that on my team. It was great.
Wow. Yeah. And that obviously brought you significant advantage. Can you dive a bit deeper into what you saw from that? And
Yeah, and it's not the answer, right? It just does a lot of the legwork for you faster. So it pulls out a report that we took to our sourcing team and said, hey, all right, this is what we're seeing in the data. This is what Claude is telling us. Like, what do you think about it? So the sourcing team took that information and used it to then reach out to certain suppliers or to validate and say, no, this isn't a concern. We already have this mitigated. But it's that, like, it takes the base research legwork out so you can hand it off for the more strategic work to happen. It doesn't just do it all for you, but it helps you take the next step.
Great. Okay, thanks. And what about standardizing practices then? Obviously something we still have to do. We talked about this global overarching CLM, but still being regional in our focus. Can you tell me how, I guess, having that kind of global integrated CLM helps you export best performing contract templates and other things to regions to I guess, ensure that kind of high performance across the organization, but still with those varying regional differences? Mercy, I'll come to you on that.
Standardizing templates is key to all of this process. So you might have a very high performing market, say in Germany, and maybe they've negotiated brilliant indemnity caps. And you have another market, say Morocco, where they've come up with, very good clauses from a renewal contract perspective. But these best practices remain siloed if they are not portable. So you have to think about standardizing templates in terms of making best practices transferable. You can't make those best templates the best kept secrets. You have to think about if it's working really well in this market, can it work globally? Can we transfer it? Can we make it portable? So standardizing templates is with that mindset of let's look for templates that show us KPIs or that show us performance metrics, that things are working really well. and we can replicate that and transfer that globally. So that would be my starting point from a global standardization standpoint.
Thank you. Mary?
Yeah, I agree. And I think clause libraries is the other piece, right? And so you can set those clause libraries regionally based on specific jurisdictions, requirements. And so it doesn't need to be the same template, and you can make it more interactive. Yeah.
Great. Do we have any questions at this point? I think before we move on to the next few questions, I thought we'd have a little break and see if there are any questions in the room. Feel free to put your hands up. Yep, we have something down the front here. If you're ready for some questions already, guys, we'll take a few. Just bear with us. We're bringing a mic your way. Thank you.
Hi, I just wanted to understand that are you also trying to cross-pollinate data between contract and risk management? For instance, the obligations that people make in the contract, if they are not getting fulfilled in the GR system, are you able to then cross-question different systems to then look at violations that are happening and claw back?
Did you get?
Yeah, if your question is more on data residency, did I get that correctly?
No, it is, we're only talking about contracts.
Yeah.
Getting data from contracts, but are you cross-validating what has been promised in the contracts are being delivered in the GR and fulfillment systems to be able to, hold the teams accountable and even maybe claw back from payments?
Absolutely. Do you want to take that?
Sure, yeah. Yes, and so managing the obligations of what's in a contract, yes, I think performance management and obligations management are part of a lot of like the top CLM products that are out there. And so you can do that, and you can check in and on the performance, and is the supplier meeting what they say they're going to do? Because that's one of the areas of the value leakage that you were mentioning, right? If you don't do that, that's where you're leaving money on the table or opening yourselves up to risk situations.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that. I don't think you can measure success without looking at those performance metrics. So before we say a template should be standardized and portable and transferred across to make it global, I want to make sure that the suppliers are delivering to what they promised. So there's a lot of overpromise on the delivery, and if you won't know except to do the analysis. So are we tracking our SLAs consistently? Are we making sure that we're holding the suppliers accountable? Are we able to report on those metrics on an ongoing basis? That's what helps determine if performance is being achieved.
Yeah, and I love that you mentioned the templates, because again, this is where like the upfront work is important. If your contracts are not structured in the right way, you're not going to be able to track those obligations. And so doing that work up front and making sure you have them, they're clearly like written out and able to understand and able to be tracked is important. And so like the strength of your contract is going to be really key in that as well.
Great. Thank you for your question. Any more questions?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So when we look at CLM platforms, they are enterprise platforms, right? You have different groups from legal, procurement, IT security, and whatnot. How have you overcome some of those challenges as it relates to adoption at your organization?
Okay.
Yeah.
Who wants to start with that one?
Yeah, I can start with that. That is a very, very good question. It's almost of a top-down approach where you take the shot at mandating that this is the one door, this is the one tool that the enterprise uses. Now, it takes a lot of work to get there, and it's usually seen around transformational projects. So now, folks do not have any other choice than to come through that one door. That's how you force adoption, and if force is the wrong word, but that there's literally no other way for you to go through except that one door. So that's what we've seen, where you mandate that teams use that one tool. You bring in legal, you bring in procurement, of course, you bring in stakeholders, they all have a role They have a clear role of what they are playing, either in ordering, reviewing, stamping, whatsoever it is. It's very clear, and they have that one tool through which they are able to process contracts. That's what I've seen from an integration standpoint.
Yeah, and I'll add yes to all of that. I think procurement and legal need to work together, right? Because they're really the two gates to the contracting piece. So you have to have that strong relationship with legal. You have to be on the same page as them. And then in regards to the other teams maybe trying to bypass both of you, there have to be consequences, right? So you have to have the entry point, you have to have the single place to go, and you have to have consequences if they don't do that. And that's where the top-down buy-in is important, because if there's no consequence for breaking the rules, even a small, it doesn't need to be a big consequence, right? Even an escalated email or like, hey, we're tracking you. This is the third time you've done this. We're going to take your system access temporarily away. Like small consequences, when people know they're being watched, that matters too.
So thank you. We'll come to some more questions at the end. So is that a change management piece as well as a technology adoption piece? And
Yes.
How, I guess you talk about top-down, Mary, maybe to kind of build on that point, how does leadership set the tone and work that down effectively as part of that kind of change management program?
Yeah, I think getting that buy-in at the top is really important.
Yeah.
Getting the support and getting leaders to walk the walk, right? Like our CPO will always follow the rules. She doesn't break them. And that's really important because like you need to demonstrate that the tools and the systems and the guardrails we have are there for a reason. And it doesn't matter who you are, like follow what they say. And we're doing our best to make it easy for you to get what you need done. And so having that voice at a leadership level is really important. And it helps with all of the change management as we go like team by team and work through this adoption of those multiple groups.
Very thank you. Mercy.
Absolutely, I agree with that. Tone at the top is everything. The other piece to it too is tying your systems end to end. Meaning, if you did a contract on a SharePoint or you did it on your own, there's no way you're getting that paid because it's tied to your ERP system, and therefore, the supplier is coming and saying, I haven't been paid, what's going on? Well, it didn't go through the right tool, and so, you're not going to get an exception for that. So tying things together such that it's end-to-end also makes change management a little bit easier. And I think that can be an approach from an enterprise standpoint. Well, it's easier said than done because there's a lot that goes into bringing every piece together. Different markets, different regulations, different rules. So it's going to take time. It's almost like a journey of transformation. But change management is a big piece of it.
Sure. And how, I guess to you, Mercy, how do you make sure that you manage that compliance and that risk process with such a big transformation program? What are the kind of key steps or key focus areas for that from your perspective?
Yeah, so following the change model process where you think about your end users and what's in it for them. So we're going to the business when we're saying, if we have one contract lifecycle management solution, this is what it does for you. What is in it for them? Really, really clearly stating the benefits. I think one of that, like if we can emphasize that benefit very clearly, that's one of the reasons where adoption can become higher, right? Letting them know what's in it for them. The second is making sure that back doors are shut as much as possible. You're not coming to me as a compliance person and saying, can you give me an exception? I just need this quickly. Again, not everything is black and white. There are going to be times where you have to play in the gray and kind of figure out what the business needs and adapt quickly. It's not about following the rules to the point where it makes no sense. That's not what I'm saying. But being adaptable and making sure that you can emphasize the benefits, they know what it is. They know that the cycle time gets better. If you go through the main door, your contracts get processed quickly, you get the right approvals, you're using the right preferred supplier networks. Things are pushing through quicker than if you go through the backlog. So emphasizing the benefits and holding, there's going to be a lot of hand holding, training, day in the life, let me show you how it's done type of scenarios across the journey.
Yeah, I love that. A couple things really resonate, like exceptions take longer. I say that to people all the time. People come and I say, God, we should just take it through the process. It's easier. Otherwise, we got to go chase down all of these one-off exceptions. Just take it through the process. It'll go faster. And then the second thing is, like, our mantra through our transformation has been make it easy for people to do the right thing.
Yes.
If people are always doing the wrong thing, using those back doors, we have to kind of look at ourselves and say, have we made it too hard for them to go the right way? And so you've got to make it easier to do the right thing. And that's how you can be successful.
Absolutely.
And how does that transformation, when you get there, it's more complex than we're probably talking about now, but how does that help the people in the function? I mean, how does it help the procurement professionals that we're talking about to become more strategic, to add value to the business, and I guess to elevate the enterprise as a whole? Mary?
Yeah, everything needs to be done faster.
Sure.
Isn't that just like where we live today? And so I think that's how it helps. People need to move at the speed of the business, as we say at ServiceNow, right? And so you have to be able to get this stuff done quickly. And if you can, it frees up time to focus on those other things. And so we talked about like using the data set that is your contracts to understand your heat maps, your spend leakage, what opportunities you might have. That's where the category managers can focus if they're spending less time on like administrative tasks of getting a contract through the process.
Absolutely, I agree with that. And I think I was thinking about the preferred supplier network, where you think about the suppliers that you pre-negotiated based on different aspects and facilities and all of that. And, just making that path the part of least resistance, so the business can quickly go through that. They're not going through multiple approvals every now and then. So painting that picture of the benefits for them, and carrying them along. I think we always go back to that, just that hand holding and making sure that they see the benefits. And the category managers can really focus on what's strategic. There's less of the administrative piece if we can take care of that on the back end. They can focus on what they should focus on and, think about long-term benefits to the company.
Great. So where do you see, we've talked about people there, where do you see the technology side developing? Where for you are the biggest, I guess, advances now and into the next 3 to 5 years? And I know we've talked about AI. Where do you see that bringing the most benefit in all of the areas we're talking about? Mary?
Yeah, I think, AI is the hot topic, right? And
Sure.
so that's it. Absolutely. Like being able to engage with your contract data. Like for so long, it has just lived in PDFs and the only way to get to it was to open them. And I think, we've all done that. You've been in that position where you're like, I need to find this, and you're opening PDF after PDF. That is going to be such a game changer when you can just conversate with an AI agent that can tell you what you need to know about your contracts. Like, to me, that's a big future.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that. I think AI is more than a buzzword now, and most technologies are moving towards that. I would say circular economics, that's another big area we're moving towards, where the whole idea to reduce waste and focus on performance, focus on usage-based pricing, focus on uptime, focus on performance-driven availability, things like that. Products as a service, that's another example. So I think most, from a technology standpoint, we're trying to get to a point where we can measure better. We want speed. Everybody wants to go really fast. And so I think the circular economics piece is where the industry is heading towards more than ever before. To give a quick example, you can have a company selling tires, and historically, from a traditional CLM standpoint, they would focus on how they contract for the sales of just tires. Future state, from a technology standpoint, we're now thinking about what are we locking into the contract? Are we thinking about uptime? Are we thinking about miles driven with the ability to do a take-back obligation? Or if you're selling, say you're selling an equipment, you're thinking about the uptime that you factor into, like 99.9% into the contract. So technology is really moving towards where we can measure at the speed of light and get insights more readily. Is it automation, agentic AI, whatever tool we're using, at the end of the day, we just want to be able to make better decisions. I think that's where we're going.
Great. Interesting you talk about circular economy there. Are you talking about, I guess, a shift towards contracting for outcomes, for
Yes.
for value in that sense? Is that right, Mercy?
Absolutely. So we're moving towards outcome driven. I gave some examples. Usage-based pricing is an example of outcome driven metric that we would measure. Performance is another one. Availability is another one. There was an independent benchmark results that showed that about 60% of commercial industries already expect this to be table stakes. So that's where the industry is going, very outcome driven. We're moving away from one-time relationship with supplier to very long-term relationships. We're thinking about how can I strategize with this supplier, thinking about the vision of my company for the next 2 to 3 years or even 10 years. So more outcome-based focus is where the industry is heading.
Yeah, I love that. And I think we've seen like hardware has been a place where we've seen that before, right? When you're buying, laptops or things like that for your company, we've seen this type of model of like, refreshes and working with providers. It's not just buying like an individual laptop, it's a program to keep the sort of like latest laptops and not outdated laptops in the hands of your employees. And so we're seeing that spread into other areas that are less traditional for sure.
Great. Okay. Fantastic. So obviously we're moving towards the future there. I want to make sure we leave a couple of minutes for a couple of last questions, should there be any. I guess if you're talking about the here and now, and for the people in the audience, what for you both is the one immediate change that people can make today, or certainly when they leave here, in terms of evolving that CLM function, so to make it really future-proof, bearing in mind all of the kind of evolutionary things we've talked about. Mary?
Yeah. For me, it's the metadata. Get that data from your contracts in a place that it's usable. And so wherever you're going to start, is it, start with the biggest regions, the largest contracts, the top X% of spend, but start there because you really have to move out of your PDF world and into this metadata world. And that to me is the first step to take. Thank you.
I agree with that. I would say for me, standardize your templates. As much as possible, stop starting from the scratch. If something is already working well in one market, in one region, find a way to transfer those best practices and try as much as possible to work towards standardized templates.
Brilliant. Thank you both. We have a couple of minutes. I know we had a few questions in the middle. Does anyone else have any more questions? If you pop your hands up, we can bring you a microphone. Anybody? I saw it. No, that was an itch. Okay, thanks. It's like being at an auction. Okay, well, that's it then. Thank you. That's the end of our panel. Thank you both. Thank you to Mary. Thank you to Mercy. Love that. Love the outcome-driven approach. Really interesting.